You must start from 2 lines from the top, some of Dalit. And it's explaining that the same Ayin, particularly when you talk about Ayin Atzmi, that was the primary truth, it can be recognized at different levels, and even though there are different levels, it's the very same reality, the very same truth, but it's on different levels, and because of the different levels, it can relate to that level. And as we explained yesterday, it's a very subtle thing, but extremely important, that everything is rooted in the Etzem, the highest and the lowest. Therefore, recognizing this Atzmi's truth on the lowest level is not a strange thing. Which means, however, that you recognize only that element, you recognize it at that and from that perspective, in that level, in that manner. But it's the very same truth. And this is how it is possible that Lakus, Chochma Datzilus, should be mislavish in halachos gashmiyim. We always explain this is an important Indian, which is missed very often. It seems that the halachos gashmiyim are the result from a gashmistic perspective. In other words, it's just a circumstantial conclusion. Like we say, loy signoiv, do not steal. It has nothing to do with Chochmah Datzilus. So when it comes down into this world, is this just a worldly reality? Or is this a godly reality? So what we are saying is that the godly truth can relate. And once it comes down into the way it is perceived from the worldly level, it makes perfect good sense. You can relate to it, you can talk about it from a godly perspective, not from a worldly perspective. The same is true in Shomis. Sheyesh hafresh, that there is a difference between the Shomis da Atzilus and the Shomis da Biyah. There's a difference between the Shomis of Atzilus and Shomis of Biyah. They're inherently different. But Hagam, although the whole Han Shomis Masim is Hain, that all the Shomis are Tiyon, they fit with one another. They're all the Shomis. Why? Because in truth, they're all Elokus Mamosh. Mamosh means not that they have a tendency and they have understanding of it. They are Elokus. The whole Neshama, the union from the Neshamas is a godly phenomenon. There's no worldly explanation for the Neshamas. Even though they function in the world, there's no worldly explanation of what kind of entity is this? How does that work? want to interject here. We got so far. Kul Malakus Mamash does not mean simply they're all ruchnius, they're all spiritual. Malakus Mamash means that they have this fundamental truth and reality. Motzu Irisha. There is no explanation as to why I see, why I understand. It's Ayin Eliki. Like we say all the time. I see because it exists, because it's true, not because I see. It's a godly phenomenon. Kul Malakus Mamash. Everybody understands the difference between Ruchnius and Malakus, right? And then we discuss this all the time. It's not a question of Ruchnius. Feelings and even if you hit the table and you feel the pain, it's also a Ruchnius that you feel. Feel it through the Gashma, but it's still, there's no Gashmizik damage. You can't explain the Gashmizik. How do you feel it? But a Lakus Mamash means literally something which is not worldly. There's no way to understand it from a worldly perspective. It precedes world, precedes creation.
I'm sorry, Rabbi. Can you yes explain a bit at least, like, the Ruchnius?
The what?
Look, you said there's no need to explain the Ruchnius, the difference between Ruchnius and Malakus, and then you gave this example this example of the hitting the table and feeling of it as Ruchnius. I mean, for me it's very confusing. I'm sorry, so can you just explain a bit?
What does it mean, a Lakus Mamash? Does that have a meaning to you?
Yeah, that part I understand. Okay. You explained it.
Why? That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. So there is no need to, when it's not a Ruchnius, but it's a Lakus, that difference you're saying there is no need to distinct. And
there is a need to distinguish, but there's no need to speak about it. Everybody recognizes the difference. Ruchnius is a created thing. Malakus is not a created thing.
Okay.
I mean, to understand Malakus is quite difficult.
I'm saying I understand. I'm saying in context, what you explaining, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why Malakus Mamash means that it is the fundamental godly reality. Kul Malakus Mamash.
Did you say that understanding Malakus is difficult?
Yeah. Ukmei shenisboel yilde masilel teresnei. The Malakus Mamash mikol mokoim, and yet still yesh chiluk bein neshamas da atzilus and neshamas da biyah. There is a difference between the neshamas of atzilus and the neshamas of biyah. And what is the difference? How do we identify the difference? The neshama da atzilus, where the neshama of atzilus biridos or lemato, in its descent downwards, coming down into the world, ein on itfeses begeshem. It is not grasped by the geshem, by the physicality. We'll try to discuss this in a moment, but this is the principle. Ein nitfeses begeshem. Umistalekes, and thus mistalekes, it removes itself, it goes away, mistalek, rises up, b'sha'az hachet. If there is a chet, the neshama cannot relate to it. and mistalekis. And it goes away. U'neshames de biyah nitfosim b'geshem. And the neshames of biyah nitfosim b'geshem. They do relate to Gashmi. And therefore, they can go through a phenomenon of a chet and remain present. Nitfosim b'geshem. What does nitfosim b'geshem mean? It makes sense. Gashmius made sense. Neshamas Atzilus, Gashmius does not make sense. It says that the tzaddikim before the Mabul, the original millennium, they did not appreciate Gashmi. They did not relate to Gashmi. So they said, "B'chanoich, v'yizhal lechanech es hor elekim, ve'inenu." Chanech was walking in the path of Elekim, and then when the world became coarse and fell down into deeper into Gashmis, into Chet, he simply vanished, because there was nothing to hold on to. You couldn't hold on to the Gashmi. Like we always give the mashal from Leisignev. The Gashmius, there is a place for Leisignev. In the sense that there should be peace between two people. They should respect one another. Should not annoy each other. Should not trespass on each other's rights. All kinds of different things. You should not annoy each other. The Neshamas Atzilus, Eilim Tvosim Gashmis. He cannot even perceive of such a phenomenon. That which is not given to me directly from my emotion, I don't see. The fact that it exists in Gashmis does not make it visible. Mit Eilim Tvosim Gashmis. Neshamas biyah nitfosim b'gashmis, even though they're also neshamas, and alakus mamish. Nitfosim b'gashmis.
This phenomenon of neshamas mistalekas like that and stuff like that, like it doesn't have a precedence these days as well, just like before by tzaddikim, I'm saying, by this kind of neshamas. So they also like chanoich and things like that.
Chanoich?
Like chanoich, like all
I don't know what's the
similar.
What's the difference?
I don't know, I'm just wondering. Curious.
Okay.
There's nothing. No difference.
No, I really don't want to deviate.
Okay.
Just to understand the Ayin.
Okay.
To understand the nitfases b'gashmis, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
It is a challenge. Maybe nitfases b'gashmis.
Sometimes Gashmi seems easy to understand. In Salakus, it's the hard part.
There you have it. Isn't that amazing? How do you understand Gashmius? If Gashmius does not recognize the Yisoid HaYisoid Amud HaChochma Tzaddish Hashem Motzer Yishe, how can you understand Gashmius? He doesn't have a basis for being. It is all a precarious existence. And of course, there's a motivation. There's a real thing. I can understand Gashmis. Gashmis which denies this whole thing. Well, at least it doesn't subscribe to it, doesn't point to it.
Because you're in it.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because the Shomas Libiyah, Nitvasim Agashmis, they can Nitvasim Agashmis. Nitvasim Agashmis means, as we said, they still Nishom, they still Lokus. They still see the godly truth.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be realized through Gashmis. Even though Gashmis is the opposite of Lokus, in a sense.
Isn't it that?
Well, listen. Gashmis is the opposite of Lokus. Gashmis exists only as a result of an encounter. You understand what that means? We mention all that. Result of encounter. I happen to meet Avitis. This is the Gashmis. Gashmis is primarily, where is Gashmis have its full-fledged expression in darkness. But the only way things exist is by encounter. A moment before encounter, it doesn't exist. There's no truth about it. What's an encounter means? Encounter means it touched it. It touched me. It affected me.
You happened upon it.
It happened upon it, and it touched me. So I know it from that moment on, from the moment when it touched me. This is the phenomenal tragedy. It's called tragedy because it affects so many. You know, the scientific truth. What is the truth? It touches you. This is how you know the reality of the world. That's the beginning of existence. What's proof? Proof means something that touches you. And that becomes the fundamental reality, truth. The furthest things from the truth is the truth.
You wouldn't think an neshama could get nidfas in that.
What?
So the neshama is a lakus, and it's nitfas begashmius. In other words, if it does touch gashmis, it can relate to gashmis.
Not that it's captured there, but that it kind of relates.
Right. It is. It's a difficult thing in both directions, but to understand neshama and lakus, nitfas begashmis is also difficult. But even though it remains a lakus, in a way it still recognizes that the fundamental truth, the Motzei Rishon, this is the reality, and yet it's nitfas begashmis.
I guess I don't understand this, what you're trying to tell me.
I also don't.
Huh?
Yes, what?
It sounds like that this phenomenon that is able to relate to Gashmius is of a higher origin, that is not of that neshama that is not able to relate to Gashmius.
No, I said neshamas atzilus cannot relate to gashmis.
Right.
Neshamas biyah can.
Right. So it sounds like that it could relate to Gashmius and still see that it's Elokus, that they still could see Elokus.
So it sounds like a mila?
Yeah, sounds like maybe I guess I don't understand, but that's what it sounds like.
The Elokus becomes concealed. And that's how it's possible for them to sin. They're still Elokus, but the Elokus element is concealed. And what happens there is that, yes, indeed, the encountered element assumes the Eloki level of reality.
It like usurps, it kind of assumes the reality thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. The encounter, that's the beginning of reality.
Which is confusion.
Which is confusion, which is a fundamental error.
It's false.
I thought every neshama leaves. Neshama should not to be Torah. So, seemingly by every chet, every neshama leaves the scene. You know?
The neshama does not leave this scene. The neshama does not fully participate in this scene, but does not leave. It is like the says she's in prison. But you can understand what's going on in prison.
So saying one level can understand. Not participate, but can understand.
Not participate, right. That's why it's possible ultimately to cleanse it.
And the other level, eneno noyach, was completely absent. Not in
noyach,
prison,
chanoch.
not present, not in prison, but just pashut not there.
And the Neshama of Atzilus can never sin?
That's what we say, that tzaddikim cannot sin. That's what a tzaddik is.
Moshe wasn't allowed into Eretz Yisrael.
Okay, so that kasha he'll ask Moshe Rabbeinu. V'chein klovos ha'hefresh ben neshama is the action. Similarly, klovos ha'hefresh, the general difference between the neshama is the action, the neshama is of now, the neshama is hachadosh is the liyosit. Neshama is the action means the general, the neshama is of this period from creation all the way till the end of time. But the neshama is the liyosit because the neshama is hachadosh is. No neshamas. Sheyiyu mibchinas pnimis atik. Those neshamas will be mibchinas from the aspect that's called pnimius atik. Pnimius atik. What is the difference? What's the emphasis of pnimis atik? Pnimis and chitzenius are, we learned already, we discussed it many times, of paramount significance. Chitzenius is how this is manifest. Pnimius has no manifestation. Pnimius is how the Ayin is because of its connection to Elokus, to Atzmos. That's Pnimius. Chitzenius is when this connection is manifest. The Shomas, the Liyosid, will be Mimchinas Pnimius Atik. We'll see if necessary. We'll discuss it. See how far we're going to be. It's explained elsewhere The Hanshama is the actual that the current Neshama is Yis'alu. They will be elevated. Al Yidei Shiyiyun Yichlolim B'Neshomas D'Liyosi. As a result of the fact that they will be incorporated in the Neshomas in the future Neshomas. Ukyodu'am. And as is known, Be'inyan, and explain the pasuk, V'achaltem ochel, V'achaltem ochel. The Ben was the pasuk, V'achaltem ochel v'seveya, V'achaltem v'shamotye. V'achaltem ochel, what does it mean, V'achaltem ochel? You will eat, eating. Teichlu dovor shekvar necha. You will eat something that was already eaten away before. As it explains in the Kutitei, that the Neshomas, the Yosit, they will incorporate the Neshomas, the actual. The current Neshomas will have gone through all the Birurim and all their Aveda. The Neshomas, the Yosit, will incorporate that. Oche, they will consume that which was already gone through its Aveda. The be'emes, for in truth, gam neshomes the achshov hein alakus. Because the neshomes the achshov also are alakus. And this is why, because the neshomes the achshov are also alakus, this is why leosid love, they will be able to be incorporated in the neshomes the yosid. We will be able to be elevated by being incorporated in the Shomas Yosef because they also inherently that fundamental truth of Holocaust. Harei, thus from this whole discussion we see Shagam b'bechinas hamshochas ha'atzmis, that even in the phenomenon, in this element of hamshocha ha'atzmis, hamshocha that is an atzmis hamshocha, not the chitzonis of hamshocha that represents the etzem reality. Yesh kilug, there is there too a difference. Me'eze madrega hamshocha hi, from which madrega the hamshocha comes. Even though it's Hamshocha Atzmis, and there is that fundamental truth of its shoylish. Like we said, in general, how does a Neshama give life? What's life? We have no explanation from a worldly perspective whatsoever what life is. We hardly know how it functions, but what its koyach is, there's no way. Then on top of it, we have what's called a chayas eleki, a shoma elekis. Shoma elekis, whose chayas consists in seeing the elokus in everything. There's a difference between seeing the elokus in contrast to Gashmius and seeing the elokus directly. Like we learned earlier in the previous mind. The Nefesh HaBahamis can also, through Avodah, be led to recognize that there is in the Holocaust. The Tzorich Yirtzeh is the Holocaust. Because once it understands the insignificance of Gashmis, of the worldliness, then recognize, oh, but there has to be this truth of Elokus. So Rabbi says also, focus on Tzorich Yitzis, but to actually recognize it and relate to it, know it, that is really a phenomenal thing. This is the unity of Neshama itself. No matter where it is, it only recognizes its tendency, its reality is something that is true inherently. Motzei Rishi. So there's a difference. The Neshama knows Elokus not by contrast. But this is its fundamental knowledge. Which means it is, to begin with, relating to a fundamental truth.
So then, is it then, we have the question is, how come we have this phenomenon of neshomas, of biyah, nitfas begeshen? Like how does that occur? Since that it's fundamental truth, who's fundamental truth, so where does it come to, where is it concealment?
This is what he is explaining. That it could be a different Elokus and different madrigas.
This where it says nitfas begeshen. Is it okay to understand that shayach begeshen? Like it's not captured there by the level of physicality. It's more, it relates to it. Is that how we should understand this?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's nitfas begeshen. That's why it's capable to relate to it.
Nitfas sounds captured there, completely.
No, nitfas does not mean necessarily captured.
Okay.
It can relate to it. Fire is nitfas in the psila.
Yeah, I mean you can't go somewhere else. It's attached.
No. But what does it do with the psila? Does it become a psila? It consumes the psila.
So is sort of saying that the neshamas of biyah belong in this realm of the Gashmis. This is their real, this is their Aveda, this is where they burn. This is where they're comfortable.
No, that's not true. They're more comfortable in Gan Eden than in Gashmis. But they can orient themselves in the Gashmis if you want as well.
Okay, this is.
Huh?
I was just saying, and you're saying that this is because they're nimsha from a different madrega and elokus. That's why they're able to be nitfas and gashmis. Is that what you're saying?
To remain on this call, press 1. Disconnected.
Maybe that would be a good thing to point out. There is a shluchish lodem kimeisei, and literally shluchish lodem kimeisei that he goes on a shlichus, whatever he does is like the Yisrael Shalech has done. But then, if he deviates ever so slightly from his shlichus, he's no longer representing Yisrael Shalech. How can it be like that? And how can he deviate? He's coming there to do the shlichus. The answer is, he's coming there to do the shlichus. But he is now coming there, and there he sees different options. So he remembers that he is a shliach, but he also sees different options. And these different options may cause him to err. So what does this answer your question? Seems that his whole representation of the Mishaleach is, in the fact, in a functional level, to do the shlichus. Therefore, that can be perverted. If he adds him like a son, the difference between a shliach and a son. The son cannot become not his son. Even if he errs, even if he goes off the path that his father directed him, he still remains his son. Because he has a deeper relationship than the function in which he is occupied. But if his fundamental reality is on a functional level, then he can make a mistake.
Which one? The biyah is the functional level one, or the biyah is the son that can even go through sin and still remain?
Ultimately, yes, but he can relate. In other words, the real morsel of this is not that the son can no longer become, but he does not see but his shlichus. There's a story of the Rebbe, since we don't have a minyan anyway. The story of the Rebbe was sent by the previous Rebbe to Reb Chaim Eiser, with the shlichus of Chaim Eiser. And he went to the Beis Medrash, and he asked if he'd like to see Reb Chaim Eiser. And he told him Chaim Eiser is now busy, somebody is visiting, and he has to wait. So he sat down in Beis Medrash and he waited. And in the meantime, the Bochum over there found out who he is and started talking to him. He learned it. And he's completely mumbled. He doesn't know anything.
Really, huh?
He doesn't know anything. Finally, he was called into Reb Chaim Eiser. And he did his shlichus. In the meantime, the Bochum told Reb Chaim Eiser, this is the Mamish Rebbe's Ayin, and he's a total amoritz. Of course, we try to talk to him, and he doesn't answer. So Chaim Eiser, and then afterwards, Rebbe came out, said, okay, let's talk. Give me your questions, and then he opened up. Chaim Eiser said, how do you do that? You made him think that Mamish Rebbe's Ayin is a nothing. So he says, before I finished the shlichus, I didn't exist.
I
did not exist.
Neshama dead silas.
Huh?
Neshama dead silas.
na na